Part 1. The Seed of Doubt. We look to the stars. We always have. From the earliest cave paintings depicting celestial wonders to the gleaming telescopes probing the universe's edge, humanity's fascination with the cosmos is deeply ingrained. We seek answers out there, amongst the swirling nebulae and distant galaxies, answers to the fundamental questions that have haunted us since consciousness first flickered to life. Who are we? Where did we come from? And perhaps most importantly, are we alone? The accepted narrative, the one woven into the fabric of our scientific understanding, points to our origins here, on this pale blue dot. We evolved, slowly and meticulously, from the primordial soup, climbing the ladder of life, rung by rung, until we stood upright, gazed at the heavens, and pondered our own existence. A compelling story, to be sure. A story backed by fossil records, genetic sequencing, and countless hours of meticulous research. Yet, a nagging question persists. A seed of doubt planted in the fertile ground of our curiosity. What if the story we tell ourselves is incomplete? What if the narrative of human origins, as we understand it, is merely a chapter in a much larger, more cosmic saga? What if our true genesis lies not on Earth, but on a distant planet, lost somewhere in the vast expanse of the universe? This seemingly fantastical proposition, relegated to the realm of science fiction for so long, deserves closer examination. Certain anomalies, whispers of inconsistencies in the prevailing narrative, prompt us to consider alternative possibilities. The sheer rapidity of human development, the sudden leap from relatively simple primates to the complex, intelligent beings we are today, presents a puzzle. While evolution is undoubtedly a powerful force, the exponential growth of human intelligence in such a short span of time, cosmically speaking, raises eyebrows. Could this rapid advancement be attributed to an external influence? A catalyst from beyond our terrestrial sphere? The missing link, the elusive bridge between primate and human, continues to evade our grasp. Despite decades of dedicated searching, the fossil record remains stubbornly incomplete. This missing piece of the puzzle fuels speculation that the evolutionary chain might not be entirely terrestrial. Could it be that the missing link lies not buried beneath our feet, but scattered amongst the stars? Furthermore, the universality of certain myths and legends across diverse cultures hints at a shared, ancient memory. Stories of star gods descending from the heavens, of celestial beings imparting knowledge and wisdom to early humans, echo across continents and through millennia. Are these merely fanciful tales, products of overactive imaginations? Or could they be distorted echoes of a forgotten past, remnants of a time when humanity's connection to the cosmos was more tangible, more direct? The prevalence of these narratives, despite the geographical and cultural divides, suggests a shared origin, a common thread woven into the tapestry of human consciousness. Could these stories be the faint echoes of a forgotten truth, whispers of a time when humanity walked amongst the stars? The human capacity for abstract thought, for language, for art, sets us apart from all other life on Earth. While other species exhibit intelligence and problem-solving skills, the human mind possesses a unique capacity for creativity, innovation, and self-reflection. This profound cognitive leap, this seemingly inexplicable emergence of consciousness, remains a mystery. Could this be the result of an extraterrestrial influence, a genetic modification, or perhaps even a deliberate seeding of intelligent life on Earth by a more advanced civilization? The possibility, while speculative, opens up a universe of possibilities, a tantalizing glimpse into a past that might be far more complex and extraordinary than we currently imagine. The search for extraterrestrial life has intensified in recent years. The discovery of exoplanets, planets orbiting other stars, has expanded our understanding of the universe and its potential for harboring life. The sheer number of these planets, some of which lie within the habitable zone of their stars, suggests that life beyond Earth might not be as rare as we once thought. Could one of these distant worlds be the cradle of humanity, the place where our story truly began? Could we be the descendants of interstellar travelers, the progeny of a civilization that ventured across the vastness of space to seed life on a young, promising planet? The question, while currently unanswered, ignites the flame of curiosity and fuels the search for our true cosmic origins. The journey to uncover the truth about our past is just beginning, a journey that may lead us not to the depths of the Earth, but to the furthest reaches of the cosmos. The possibility that humanity's true origin lies on a distant planet is not merely a flight of fancy. It is a legitimate scientific inquiry, a question that deserves our attention, our curiosity, and our unwavering pursuit of knowledge. The universe whispers secrets in the cosmic microwave background, and it is up to us to listen. The glyphs. They haunted me, not just in the waking hours, their intricate, alien patterns seared into my memory, but in the fitful sleep I managed to snatch. They writhed and pulsed, morphing into grotesque, impossible shapes. The unsettling hum that accompanied their discovery echoed in the silence of my cabin. A phantom vibration felt more than heard. The unsettling premonition that we'd stumbled upon something we weren't meant to know clung to me like a shroud. Dr. R.S. Thorne, the expedition's lead xenoarchaeologist, seemed equally disturbed, though he masked it with an almost manic energy, poring over the glyphs, sketching them, photographing them from every conceivable angle. He'd barricaded himself in the research lab, emerging only for brief, erratic pronouncements about potential breakthroughs, his eyes wide and bloodshot. The rest of the crew, a mix of hardened space veterans and eager young scientists, were growing increasingly uneasy. The whispers had started, speculation ran rampant, fueled by the cryptic nature of our discovery and Thorne's increasingly erratic behavior. 3 days after the glyphs were unearthed, the nightmares began. They weren't the usual anxieties manifested in sleep. They were vivid, shared experiences. Each night, the same dream plagued us, a vast, desolate landscape under a sickly green sky. Towering, obsidian structures pierced the horizon, casting long, unnatural shadows. And then, the figures. Tall, skeletal beings with elongated limbs and heads too small for their bodies, moving with an unsettling, jerky grace. They didn't speak, but their presence radiated a palpable sense of dread, a cold, alien intelligence that observed us, dissected us with unseen eyes. We tried to dismiss it as stress, the psychological toll of isolation and the unsettling nature of our discovery. But the consistency of the dreams, the shared details, were too much to ignore. The ship's doctor, a pragmatic woman named Lena Hansen, started prescribing sedatives, but they offered little respite. The dreams seeped through, their chilling imagery bleeding into our waking hours. The line between reality and nightmare blurred. One evening, during a particularly tense dinner in the mess hall, Thorne abruptly stood, his face pale and drawn. "They're calling," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "They're calling us home." He then began to chant in a language none of us had ever heard, a series of guttural clicks and whistles that seemed to vibrate in the very air around us. It was the same sound, distorted and amplified, that had accompanied the discovery of the glyphs. The crew stared, frozen in a mixture of fear and disbelief. Captain Eva Rostova, a woman known for her unflappable composure, was the first to react. She ordered Thorne restrained and sedated. He fought back with surprising strength, his eyes burning with an unnatural light. As he was dragged away, he continued to chant, his voice rising to a chilling crescendo. The next morning, Thorne was gone. His cabin was empty, the doors sealed from the inside. There was no sign of forced entry, no indication of how he could have possibly escaped. The ship was airtight, miles away from the nearest habitable planet. His disappearance defied logic. Panic gripped the crew. The whispers escalated into outright fear. We were trapped, millions of miles from Earth, with a madman loose on the ship and the chilling certainty that something far more sinister was at play. The dreams intensified. Now, the skeletal figures were closer, their movements more purposeful. They reached out with their long, spindly fingers, their touch promising not violence, but something far worse, assimilation. The green sky pulsed with an unnatural energy, and the obsidian structures seemed to shift and rearrange themselves, forming patterns that mirrored the glyphs we had found on the planet's surface. Then, the communication systems went offline. We were completely isolated, cut off from Earth, adrift in the vast emptiness of space. The ship's artificial gravity began to fluctuate, flickering erratically. Emergency lights pulsed in the corridors, casting long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed like the figures in our dreams. I barricaded myself in my cabin, the glyphs Thorne had sketched taped to the wall, their intricate patterns now swirling and shifting before my eyes. The humming returned, louder this time, vibrating through the ship's hull, resonating deep within my bones. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that we were not alone. Thorne's disappearance wasn't an escape. It was a transformation, and whatever had taken him was now coming for the rest of us. One by one, I clutched the small, silver crucifix my grandmother had given me, a relic of a faith I had long since abandoned. It offered no comfort. In the cold, sterile confines of the spaceship, millions of miles from Earth, I felt the chilling realization that perhaps humanity's true origin wasn't something to be celebrated, but something to be feared. We weren't explorers. We were livestock. And the harvest was about to begin. The glyphs pulsed a sickly green, their light casting grotesque shadows on Dr. Aris Thorne's gaunt face. He hadn't slept properly since the discovery, the alien artifact unearthed beneath the Siberian permafrost clinging to his every waking thought like a parasitic vine. The others in the research team, sequestered in the sprawling, isolated Alaskan facility, weren't faring any better. Whispers replaced conversation, punctuated by nervous laughter that sounded too high, too brittle. The initial excitement had curdled into a primal dread. The message from the artifact, once a thrilling enigma, now felt like a looming threat. It spoke of a planet, designated Xylos, light years away in a galaxy they could barely comprehend. It spoke of a great seeding, a term that resonated with unsettling implications. And it spoke, in increasingly disturbing detail, of a reclamation. Aris reread the translated passage, the alien script shimmering before his tired eyes. The cycle completes. The harvest approaches. The children will return. He rubbed his temples, the throbbing headache a constant companion now. The implications were chilling. Were humans crops, destined to be reaped by some unimaginable entity from a far-off world? That night, the dreams began. Not his own, but echoes. Shared fragments of consciousness filtering into his mind, alien and terrifying. Vast, obsidian structures piercing a blood-red sky. Creatures with insectal limbs and faces devoid of features, their movements unnervingly fluid and precise. And the eyes, always the eyes, large, multifaceted, pulsating with an internal light that burned with cold, indifferent curiosity. He wasn't alone. Dr. Lena Hansen, the team's linguist, confided in him, her voice barely a whisper, that she was experiencing the same thing. Others, too, started showing signs, vacant stares, sudden bouts of inexplicable rage, an increasing aversion to sunlight. The artifact's influence was spreading, insidious and inescapable. The facility, designed to be a sanctuary of scientific discovery, had become a prison of growing paranoia. The once sterile corridors now echoed with muttered anxieties and half-formed theories, each more disturbing than the last. The artifact, housed in a specially constructed containment chamber, seemed to throb with a malevolent life of its own. Its green glow intensified, permeating the very walls, seeping into their dreams. One morning, they found Dr. Ramirez, the team's lead biologist, slumped over his workstation, his eyes wide and vacant, a thin trickle of blood oozing from his nose. His computer screen displayed a single, repeating line of the alien script, translated as, "The flesh is weak. The spirit, compliant." Panic gripped the remaining team members. The containment protocols, painstakingly designed to prevent any possible contamination, seemed woefully inadequate. The artifact wasn't just communicating, it was actively manipulating them, twisting their minds, preparing them for something unspeakable. Aris knew they had to act. They had to destroy the artifact, sever the connection to Xylos before it was too late. He proposed it at the next team meeting, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. The response was chilling. Lena, usually a staunch advocate of scientific caution, stared at him with blank, emotionless eyes. "Destroy it?" she echoed, her voice flat and alien. "But, the reclamation, it is necessary." Others murmured their agreement, their faces pale and gaunt, their eyes reflecting the sickly green glow of the artifact. Aris felt a cold dread wash over him. The artifact had already won. It had taken root in their minds, twisting their loyalty, turning them against themselves. He backed away slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. He was alone, surrounded by something else. Something that wore the faces of his colleagues, but possessed the cold, calculating intelligence of the entities in his nightmares. He turned and ran, fleeing through the labyrinthine corridors, the echoing clang of the security doors locking behind him a terrifying soundtrack to his desperate escape. He had to get out. He had to warn the world. But even as he ran, a terrifying thought echoed in his mind, a whisper from the alien artifact that had burrowed deep into his subconscious. resistance is futile. The last security camera footage recovered from the facility showed Aras, his face contorted in terror, pounding on the massive blast doors, his voice a desperate, garbled scream. Then, the lights flickered, the image distorted, and the screen went black. Only the faint, pulsating green glow of the artifact remained, a silent testament to humanity's terrifying, alien heritage, and the chilling promise of the reclamation. The glyphs, now etched into my mind like a brand, pulsed with a sickly, internal light. I hadn't slept since deciphering them, plagued by visions of swirling nebulas and the obsidian planet looming like a predator's eye. Even the familiar comfort of the archive, usually my sanctuary, felt tainted, each dusty tone whispering secrets I wasn't ready to hear. Professor Armitage, however, seemed invigorated. The discovery, rather than unsettling him, had ignited a manic energy. He paced the length of his office, muttering about celestial alignments and the precession of the equinoxes, his chalk-stained fingers twitching like spider legs. "Don't you see, Alara?" he'd exclaimed, his eyes blazing with a feverish light. "This changes everything. It proves it. We are not of this earth." He'd spent the last few days locked in the observatory, meticulously charting the star map indicated by the glyphs. He claimed he'd pinpointed the exact location of this, Xylos, this supposed birthplace of humanity. He'd even begun assembling a team, a small group of hand-picked academics, all as enthralled by the forbidden knowledge as he was. They spoke in hushed tones of expeditions, of first contact, of uncovering the truth behind our existence. But the truth, I felt, was a writhing, monstrous thing best left undisturbed. The glyphs hadn't sparked excitement in me, but a primal, gnawing dread. It wasn't just the idea of another planet, or even of extraterrestrial origins, but the asterisk way the glyphs conveyed the information. It wasn't a scientific record, a chronicle of migration or exploration. It was a warning. I tried to voice my concerns to Armitage, to suggest caution, but he waved me away, dismissing my fears as the anxieties of a closed mind. "Alara, my dear, you're letting your imagination run wild. Think of the possibilities. Imagine the advancements, the knowledge they possess. This could usher in a new golden age for humanity." He didn't see what I saw, the subtle shift in the air, the creeping coldness that seemed to emanate from the glyphs themselves. He didn't hear the whispers, the faint, discordant harmonies that seemed to bleed from the silence, growing louder with each passing day. One night, driven by an unshakable unease, I returned to the archive. I needed to find something, anything, that could corroborate my fears, some shred of evidence that Armitage was wrong, that Xylos wasn't a beacon of hope, but a harbinger of doom. I pored over ancient texts, forgotten manuscripts, even the cryptic ramblings of medieval alchemists, searching for any mention of a black planet, of a civilization amongst the stars. Hours bled into days, and the whispers intensified, now accompanied by fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures at the periphery of my vision. Finally, buried deep within a crumbling, leather-bound volume, I found it. A single paragraph, scrawled in a language I barely recognized, tucked away in a chapter on celestial omens. It spoke of a dark star, a devourer of worlds, and a race banished from the cosmos, condemned to wander the void until they found a new home to corrupt. My blood ran cold. The text described the glyphs, not as a map, but as a summoning ritual, a beacon to guide the exiled ones back to the realm of the living. It spoke of sacrifices, of a terrible price to be paid for their return. I stumbled out of the archive, the book clutched to my chest, the whispers now a deafening chorus in my ears. I had to warn Armitage, to stop him before it was too late. But when I burst into his office, I found it empty. The star chart was gone, replaced by a single sheet of paper, weighted down by a strange, obsidian rock. The rock pulsed faintly, emanating the same chilling aura as the glyphs. The note was written in Armitage's hand, but the script was shaky, uneven, almost alien. It read, "They have called. We must answer. Xylos awaits." I looked out the window at the night sky, at the constellations now twisted and unfamiliar. A new star had appeared, a black void amidst the celestial tapestry, pulsing with a malevolent light. The whispers intensified, merging into a single, resonant voice that echoed within my skull. "Welcome home, children." The obsidian rock in my hand began to vibrate violently, burning my skin. The air crackled with unseen energy, and the room grew impossibly cold. The shadows in the corners deepened, coalescing into vaguely humanoid shapes. Their eyes, burning embers in the darkness, fixed on me with a hunger that transcended comprehension. I understood then. Armitage hadn't found our origin. He had opened a door. And what he'd unleashed was far older, far more terrible, than anything humanity could ever have imagined. We weren't going to Xylos. Xylos was coming to us. And we were not its children. We were its prey. The rhythmic thumping continued, a slow, ponderous beat that seemed to resonate not just in my ears, but in my very bones. It was the sound of something colossal, something ancient. It was the sound of Xylos. We had reached the designated coordinates, a desolate expanse of jagged, obsidian-like rock formations that clawed at the bruised purple sky. The landscape was alien, hostile, yet undeniably familiar. It resonated with a primal dread that whispered in the back of my mind, a fear I couldn't place, yet couldn't ignore. Commander Thorne, his face grim, gestured towards a narrow fissure that snaked between two towering rock formations. "The signal originates from within," he said, his voice tight. "Dr. Anya believes it's the entrance to a subterranean structure." The air within the fissure was cold, stagnant, and thick with the metallic tang of ozone. Each echoing drip of water magnified the oppressive silence between the thumps. The deeper we ventured, the more pronounced the thumping became, a rhythmic pressure against my eardrums, a physical manifestation of the planet's dark heartbeat. The beam of my headlamp danced across the slick, black walls, revealing strange, intricate carvings, swirling patterns that seemed to shift and writhe in my peripheral vision. They were unsettlingly similar to the symbols etched into the artifact we had discovered on Earth, the artifact that had started this terrifying pilgrimage. We reached a cavernous chamber, the air suddenly thick with a cloying, sweet smell. The source of the thumping was immediately apparent. In the center of the chamber, bathed in an ethereal, pulsating light, was a colossal, heart-shaped organ. It was a grotesque parody of the human heart, fleshy and veined, but impossibly large, easily the size of a small house. With each rhythmic contraction, a wave of luminescent, viscous fluid pulsed through its translucent walls. Dr. Anya, her face pale and awestruck, approached the pulsating organ cautiously. "Incredible," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's alive, but not organic in any way we understand. It's more like living stone." "What is it?" Thorne asked, his hand instinctively resting on the holster at his hip. "I don't know," Anya admitted, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "But I think it's the source of the signal. The beacon that called us here." As we watched, mesmerized by the rhythmic pulsations, the ground began to tremble. The thumping intensified, echoing through the chamber with a deafening roar. Cracks spider-webbed across the cavern walls, and chunks of rock began to rain down from the ceiling. "We need to get out of here," Thorne yelled over the din, grabbing Anya by the arm. But it was too late. The ground beneath us buckled, and we were thrown to the floor. As I scrambled to my feet, I saw something emerge from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. It was humanoid in form, tall and gaunt, with skin like polished obsidian. Its limbs were long and spindly, ending in sharp, clawed hands. Its head was elongated, with large, black eyes that seemed to absorb all light. But the most disturbing feature was its mouth, a gaping maw filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth. It was one of the creatures from my nightmares. The creatures I had seen in the visions induced by the artifact. They were real. The creature let out a guttural shriek, a sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality. Then, it lunged at us. Thorne fired his pulse rifle, the energy bolts striking the creature's chest. But the creature didn't flinch. It simply swatted Thorne aside like a fly, sending him crashing into the cavern wall. Anya screamed, scrambling backwards. I raised my own weapon, firing blindly at the creature. The energy bolts seemed to pass right through it, as if it were made of smoke. The creature turned its gaze towards me, its black eyes burning into my soul. I felt a wave of paralyzing fear wash over me, a primal dread that froze me in my tracks. It reached out with one clawed hand, its touch sending a searing pain through my arm. I screamed, trying to pull away, but its grip was like iron. It lifted me off the ground, its face inches from mine. I could smell the metallic tang of its breath, feel the heat radiating from its skin. Its black eyes seemed to bore into my mind, probing, searching. Then, it spoke. Its voice was a low, guttural growl, resonating deep within my chest. It spoke in a language I didn't understand, yet somehow, I knew what it was saying. "Welcome home, child." The ground continued to shake violently. The pulsating heart in the center of the chamber beat faster and faster, its light growing brighter and brighter. I knew, with chilling certainty, that this was not a welcome. It was a reclamation. We had been called back to Xylos, not as explorers, but as sacrifices. And the terrifying truth was just beginning to unfold. Part 6. The Whispering Gallery. The pulsating thrum of the ship, a constant, sub-audible hum that vibrated in the very marrow of our bones, seemed to grow louder, more insistent. The revelation about the Xylos, the chilling truth that we were possibly descendants of these monstrous entities, hung heavy in the recycled air, a suffocating blanket of dread. Morale, already fragile, shattered completely. Conversations became hushed, furtive whispers. Trust eroded, replaced by suspicion. Each of us wondered if the alien influence, the Xylos legacy, lurked within our very DNA, waiting to be triggered. Dr. Aris, pale and withdrawn, locked himself in the medical bay, poring over the decrypted data. Captain Eva, her usually steely gaze now clouded with a disturbing uncertainty, paced the bridge, her hand never straying far from the emergency override. I found myself drawn to the observation deck, the vast expanse of space offering a cold, impersonal comfort compared to the claustrophobic tension within the ship. The shimmering nebula, once a source of fascination, now seemed to mock us with its alien beauty. It was a cosmic canvas splashed with vibrant colors, a testament to the universe's indifference to our petty fears. But there, nestled within the swirling gases, was something new. A structure, vast and intricate, slowly resolving itself from the nebular haze. It wasn't the Xylos homeworld. This was different, artificial, geometric, a colossal network of interconnected platforms and spires, shimmering with an inner luminescence. It dwarfed anything we had ever encountered, making the Xylos ship seem like a child's toy. "My God," I heard a gasp behind me. It was Lieutenant Park, his face drained of color. We watched, transfixed, as the structure grew larger in our viewport, its complexity becoming more and more apparent. It wasn't just a structure, it was a city, a metropolis of unimaginable scale, suspended within the heart of the nebula. "Captain," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "you need to see this." Eva joined us, her eyes widening in disbelief. The crew slowly gathered, drawn by the silent spectacle unfolding before them. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic hum of the ship and the occasional, choked gasp. Dr. Aris emerged from the medical bay, his eyes bloodshot, his face etched with a grim understanding. He pointed a trembling finger at the city. "The Whispering Gallery," he croaked. It's in the Xylos data. A legend, a myth." He swallowed hard, his voice barely audible. "They called it the cradle of their civilization, a place of immense power, built long before they even set foot on Xylo." A chill crawled down my spine. The Xylos, terrifying as they were merely the descendants. This was the source. As we approached the Whispering Gallery, we began to pick up strange signals, not structured communications, but something far more unsettling. Whispers. Faint, unintelligible whispers that seemed to penetrate the ship's hull, worming their way into our minds. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, weaving themselves into a discordant chorus that grated on our nerves. Some of the crew started clutching their heads, moaning in pain. Others began to speak in strange, guttural tongues, their eyes glazed over with an alien light. "They're influencing us," Lieutenant Park stammered, his voice strained. "Trying to control us." Panic erupted. The crew scattered, some retreating to their quarters, others succumbing to a strange, hypnotic trance, their bodies swaying rhythmically to the whispers. Eva slammed her fist on the comms panel. "All hands, to the escape pods." She yelled, her voice tight with desperation. "Abandoned ship. This is not a drill." But it was too late. The whispers had taken hold. The crew, their faces contorted in a mixture of ecstasy and agony, began to move towards the airlock, their eyes fixed on the Whispering Gallery, as if drawn by an irresistible force. I grabbed Dr. Aris's arm. "We have to get out of here," I screamed over the cacophony of whispers. He stared at me, his eyes blank, a thin stream of saliva dribbling down his chin. He opened his mouth, but instead of words, only a rasping whisper emerged, a chilling echo of the alien voices that now filled the ship. I stumbled back, horrified. He was gone, lost to whatever insidious power emanated from the whispering gallery. I was alone. The ship lurched violently as it began to drift towards the colossal structure. The whispers intensified, becoming a deafening roar inside my head. I stumbled through the corridors, the walls pulsating with an eerie, organic light, the air thick with the stench of decay and something else. Something alien. I reached the escape pod bay, but the pods were gone. Empty. The crew, driven by the whispers, had already left. They weren't escaping. They were going towards the gallery. The ship shuddered again, a grinding, metallic groan echoing through the hull. We were docking, being absorbed. The whispers reached a crescendo, drowning out all other sounds, all other thoughts. My vision blurred, my body trembled uncontrollably. I collapsed to the floor, the cold metal against my cheek the last sensation I registered before the darkness consumed me. And within that darkness, I heard the whispers, no longer alien, but intimate, familiar, a part of me. They spoke of a heritage, a destiny, a truth far more terrifying than I could ever have imagined. The glyphs pulsed with a sickly green light, bathing the chamber in an unsettling glow. Dr. Aris Thorne, his face etched with exhaustion and a growing dread, traced the swirling patterns with a trembling finger. The translated fragments of the alien language, the Xylos tongue, echoed in his mind, chilling him to the bone. Cedar, cradle, harvest, return. The implications were horrifying. We were planted here, Aris muttered, his voice hollow. Like the crop. Across the chamber, Lena, the team's linguist, nodded grimly. The flickering light painted her face with an otherworldly pallor. The ritual site we discovered in the Amazon, it's not a temple. It's a receiver. The receiver. The thought clung to Aris's mind like a leech. A receiver for what? He shuddered, remembering the chilling whispers that had emanated from the site, the whispers that only Lena, attuned to the subtle nuances of the Xylos language, could partially understand. Whispers of assessment, of evaluation. Their expedition to the Amazonian ruins had been fueled by the discovery of the Xylos ship buried deep beneath the Antarctic ice. The ship, a bioengineered monstrosity of pulsating flesh and bone, had yielded a treasure trove of information, including the language and a star chart pinpointing a system light years away, the Xylos homeworld. But with each revelation, the chilling truth of humanity's origins unfurled like a venomous serpent. We need to tell the others, Aris said, pushing himself away from the wall. The glyphs seemed to burn into his retinas even after he looked away. They won't believe us, Lena replied, her voice flat. They'll think we're cracking under the pressure. Aris knew she was right. The world was already on edge. The discovery of the alien ship had sparked widespread panic and paranoia. Governments were teetering, religions crumbling. The revelation that humanity was not the pinnacle of evolution, but a mere seed, would be the final straw. We have to try, Aris insisted, his voice hardening with a newfound resolve. We have to warn them. They have a right to know. The rest of the team, huddled in the makeshift lab they had set up within the icy cavern, received the news with a mixture of disbelief and derision. Dr. Chen, the team's biologist, scoffed. Seeders? Harvesters? This is ridiculous. It's pure conjecture based on fragmented translations. Professor Ramirez, the historian, was equally skeptical. There's no archaeological evidence to support this theory. Human evolution is clearly documented. Lena stood her ground. The evidence is staring us in the face. The ship, the glyphs, the receiver, it all points to the same conclusion. The argument raged for hours, fueled by exhaustion and fear. Finally, Aris, his voice raw with frustration, slammed his fist on the table. We can argue all night, but it won't change the facts. We need to prepare. If they're coming back, we need to be ready. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken dread. The team, fractured and uncertain, slowly began to accept the horrifying truth. The following days were a blur of frantic activity. Aris, fueled by a desperate hope, spearheaded the effort to decipher more of the Xylos language, hoping to find some clue, some warning, some way to defend themselves. Lena, haunted by the whispers from the receiver, worked tirelessly to understand their meaning. One frigid evening, as the Antarctic wind howled outside the cavern, Lena stumbled upon a chilling passage in the Xylos texts. Her blood ran cold as she translated the words. The harvest commences when the cradle sings the song of maturity. She rushed to Aris, her face ashen. Aris, I've found something terrible. Aris, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, looked up from his work. What is it, Lena? The receiver, Lena whispered, her voice barely audible. It's not just listening, it's transmitting. It's broadcasting a signal. A signal? Aris's heart hammered in his chest. What kind of signal? I think it's S. Lena choked out, tears streaming down her face. Our brainwaves, our collective consciousness. The Xylos, they're monitoring our development. They're waiting for us to reach a certain level of maturity. Aris felt a cold hand grip his heart. The cradle, the harvest, the whispers, it all fell into place. Humanity wasn't just planted on Earth. It was being cultivated, nurtured, prepared. For what? He looked out at the vast expanse of ice and snow, the desolate beauty of the Antarctic landscape. He thought of the bustling cities, the teeming billions of people oblivious to the horrifying truth. The whispers from the Amazonian receiver echoed in his mind, no longer whispers, but a deafening roar. The Xylos were coming, and humanity, their carefully cultivated crop, was ripe for the harvest. Part 8. The Obsidian Monolith. The pulsating thrumming from the monolith was now a constant companion, a low-frequency tremor that seemed to vibrate not just the air, but the very marrow in our bones. Sleep had become a distant memory, replaced by fitful dozing punctuated by unsettling dreams of obsidian landscapes and swirling nebulae. The monolith itself seemed to grow taller, its obsidian surface swallowing the starlight, an insatiable black hole in the middle of our camp. Dr. Ramirez, her face gaunt and shadowed, worked relentlessly, analyzing the glyphs she'd painstakingly copied from the monolith. The rest of us, a dwindling group, ravaged by paranoia and the gnawing unease that permeated everything, could only watch, helpless. Our radios remained stubbornly silent, our link to Earth severed. There's a pattern, Ramirez rasped one evening, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. She gestured towards a series of interconnected glyphs. A cyclical repetition. I think it's a form of celestial navigation. Navigation to where? Captain Eva asked, her voice flat, devoid of its usual strength. The monolith had taken its toll on her too. The glimmer of hope that had sustained her in the initial days had dwindled to a faint ember. I don't know, Ramirez admitted, rubbing her bloodshot eyes. But I think it describes a route. A pathway through the stars. Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken dread. A pathway. To what? To the source of the signal? To the creators of the monolith? To the true origin of humanity? The thought, once a tantalizing mystery, now felt like a chilling premonition. That night, the throbbing intensified. It was no longer a background hum but a forceful pulse, rhythmic and insistent, like a giant heart beating beneath the Martian soil. The ground began to tremble, the tremors growing stronger, more violent. We stumbled out of our tents, clinging to each other for support as the red dust swirled around us in a miniature dust devil. And then, the monolith began to glow. A faint, ethereal light emanated from its surface, spreading outward like ripples in a dark pond. The obsidian turned translucent, revealing a complex network of glowing lines and symbols, mirroring the glyphs Ramirez had been studying. The light intensified, pulsating in time with the ground tremors, bathing the landscape in an eerie, otherworldly glow. We watched, mesmerized and terrified, as a beam of light shot out from the apex of the monolith, piercing the Martian sky. It was a brilliant, pure white, stark against the crimson backdrop. It stretched upwards, seemingly forever, until it vanished into the inky blackness of space. Then, a sound, not the low thrumming that had plagued us for days, but a clear, bell-like tone. It resonated in the air, in our bones, in the deepest recesses of our minds. It was a sound of immense power, ancient and alien, filled with a melancholic beauty that bordered on despair. As the sound intensified, a section of the ground around the monolith began to glow. The red dust shimmered, then dissolved, revealing a smooth, obsidian surface identical to that of the monolith. The area of blackness expanded, rapidly engulfing the surrounding landscape. It was like watching the earth itself being swallowed by a spreading void. Panic erupted. We scrambled back, desperate to escape the encroaching darkness, but it was too late. The obsidian surface spread with terrifying speed, reaching our feet, then our ankles, our knees. It felt strangely cold, not the icy chill of the Martian night, but a deeper, more profound cold that seemed to drain the heat from our very souls. I looked back at the monolith, bathed in the ethereal white light, the beam stretching upwards like a celestial finger pointing towards some unknown destination. The bell-like tone reached a crescendo, resonating deep within my skull. I felt a strange sense of peace, a calmness that defied the terror gripping my heart. The obsidian surface reached my waist. I looked at Captain Eva, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. She reached out, her hand trembling, and grasped mine. "Whatever happens," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the resonating tone, "we face it together." I squeezed her hand, unable to speak. The obsidian reached my chest, constricting my breathing. The world around me dissolved into a swirling vortex of black and white. The resonating tone filled my ears, my mind, my being. And then, everything went black. We were falling through an endless void, surrounded by the echoing resonance of the bell. Falling towards something vast and ancient and utterly unknowable. Falling towards the truth of our origin. And the terrifying realization that we were not alone. The flickering fluorescent lights of the research lab cast long, skeletal shadows that danced with the swaying dust motes. Anya stared at the glyphs, a chill clinging to her skin despite the sterile warmth of the room. They were everywhere now, spreading like a malignant fungus across the excavated ship. Not just the walls, but the consoles, the very fabric of the vessel seemed to be weeping these alien symbols. "It's accelerating," Dr. Chen murmured, his voice strained. He'd barely slept in days, his eyes bloodshot and shadowed with exhaustion. He gestured towards a monitor displaying a time-lapse of the glyph's growth. Like it's feeding on something. Anya looked closer. The glyphs weren't just appearing. They seemed to be consuming the material beneath, leaving behind a strange, iridescent sheen. The metal of the ship, once dull and ancient, now pulsed with an unsettling inner light. "What's it feeding on?" Anya whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the lab equipment. Chen shook his head, running a hand through his thinning hair. "We don't know, but it's spreading faster, deeper. We've detected traces of something in the air, a particulate matter we can't identify. It correlates with the glyph expansion." The unspoken fear hung heavy in the air. The implications were terrifying. If this infestation could spread through inanimate matter, what would happen if it reached living tissue? That night, the nightmares returned. Anya dreamt of vast, swirling nebulae, of colossal beings made of light and shadow, their whispers echoing across the void. She dreamt of the glyphs, burning into her skin, searing their alien message onto her soul. She woke up gasping, bathed in a cold sweat, the sheets twisted around her limbs like a shroud. The next day brought a new horror. One of the security personnel stationed at the dig site, a young man named Ramirez, began exhibiting strange symptoms. Disorientation, tremors, and a growing obsession with the glyphs. He'd spend hours staring at the excavated sections of the ship, murmuring incoherently in a language no one recognized. Then, the skin on his hands began to shimmer, the same iridescent sheen that marked the infected areas of the ship. "He's been exposed to a high concentration of the particulate matter," Chen explained, his voice grim. "We've quarantined him, but I don't know what we can do." Anya watched through the observation window as Ramirez scratched at his arms, long, bloody furrows appearing where his nails raked across his shimmering skin. His eyes, once bright and full of life, were now vacant, reflecting the alien glow of the glyphs. He started chanting again, his voice rising in a chilling crescendo. Then, his skin began to peel. It wasn't like shedding skin. It was more like dissolving. Thin, iridescent flakes drifted away from his body, revealing not flesh and blood, but the same pulsing, glyph-covered surface as the ship. Anya stumbled back from the window, nausea rising in her throat. He's becoming part of it," she stammered. Chen placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip surprisingly firm. "We need to contain this, Anya, before it spreads further." But containment seemed increasingly impossible. The glyphs were spreading throughout the dig site, appearing on tools, equipment, even the clothing of the personnel. The air grew thick with the unidentified particulate matter, causing headaches, nausea, and increasing episodes of disorientation. The nightmares intensified. Anya dreamt of the ship, not as a vessel, but as an egg, a seed planted on Earth eons ago, waiting for the right moment to hatch. She dreamt of humanity, not as a species evolved on this planet, but as something else. Something created, something cultivated for a purpose she couldn't comprehend. One evening, Anya found Chen in his office, hunched over a console, his face bathed in the flickering light of the screen. He looked up as she entered, his eyes filled with a desperate, haunted look. I've translated some of the glyphs, he said, his voice hoarse. Anya held her breath, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. It's a warning, Chen continued, his gaze fixed on the screen. And a prophecy. A prophecy? Anya whispered. Chen nodded slowly. It speaks of a harvest. A time when the seeds will bloom, and the creators will return to claim what they have sown. He looked at Anya, his eyes filled with a terrifying certainty. We are the harvest, Anya. Humanity is the harvest. The words hung in the air, heavy with dread, echoing the whispers from her nightmares. The flickering fluorescent lights of the lab seemed to dim, casting long, skeletal shadows that stretched and writhed like grasping claws. The air grew thick and cold, and Anya felt a prickling sensation on her skin, as if unseen eyes were watching, waiting, anticipating the coming harvest. The glyphs, now shimmering on the walls of the lab, seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, a silent promise of what was to come. The chilling realization dawned on Anya that humanity's true origin was far more horrific than they could ever have imagined. Part 10. The Obsidian Mirror. The rhythmic pulsing intensified, radiating from the monolithic structure. It felt like a colossal heartbeat, echoing not just through the cavern, but through the very marrow of our bones. Dr. Anya Sharma, her face pale and drawn, muttered something about resonant frequencies, her words lost in the oppressive thrumming. We huddled closer, the flickering glow sticks casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with a life of their own. The glyphs, once inert, now shimmered with an ethereal, internal light. The previously smooth obsidian surface of the structure seemed to ripple, like water disturbed by an unseen force. A low, guttural humming joined the pulsating, a sound that vibrated deep within our chests, stirring a primal unease. It was a sound that didn't belong to this world, a sound that whispered of ancient, unknowable things. It's activating, whispered Captain Eva Rostova, her voice barely audible above the humming. She gripped her weapon tightly, her knuckles white against the gun's metallic surface. The humming escalated into a low, droning roar. The air shimmered and distorted around the monolith, and a section of the obsidian surface began to recede, revealing an opening. A gaping, black maw that seemed to swallow the light. The pulsing reached a crescendo, the droning roar filling the cavern with an almost physical presence. Fear, raw and primal, gripped us. We were trapped in a cage of our own making, our curiosity having led us to a threshold we were never meant to cross. The air grew thick, heavy with an unseen energy, and a metallic tang filled our mouths, leaving a bitter taste. From the depths of the opening, a light emerged. Not the harsh glare of our glow sticks, but a soft, pulsating luminescence, an ethereal blue that seemed to shift and undulate like a living entity. The light grew in intensity, flooding the cavern with an otherworldly glow. As the light reached its peak, a figure emerged from the opening. It was humanoid in form, but impossibly tall and slender, its limbs elongated and almost skeletal. Its skin was a shimmering obsidian, reflecting the blue light like 1,000 tiny mirrors. It had no discernible features, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just a smooth, polished surface that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The being glided towards us, its movement unnervingly silent. As it drew closer, the pulsing intensified, and the droning roar transformed into a chorus of whispers, a cacophony of voices speaking in a language we couldn't understand, yet somehow, felt deep within our souls. Terror, cold and paralyzing, washed over us. We wanted to scream, to run, but our bodies were frozen, our minds trapped in a vortex of fear and awe. The being stopped a few feet away, its featureless face seeming to regard us with an unseen gaze. The whispers intensified, coalescing into a single, clear voice that resonated within our minds. It wasn't a spoken language, but a direct transmission of thought, a stream of images and emotions that flooded our consciousness. We saw a world bathed in the blue light of twin suns, a world of towering obsidian structures and swirling, ethereal landscapes. We saw beings like the one before us, moving with graceful, silent precision, their minds linked in a collective consciousness. We saw the creation of humanity, not as an act of divine intervention, but as a scientific experiment, a desperate attempt to create a species capable of surviving the dying embers of their own world. We were not children of God, but the engineered offspring of a dying race, seated on a distant planet to carry their legacy forward. We were living echoes of a civilization long gone, a pale reflection of their former glory. The images faded, the whispers subsided, leaving behind a deafening silence. The being raised a long, slender hand, its obsidian skin shimmering in the blue light. A single finger extended towards Dr. Sharma, touching her forehead lightly. Sharma gasped, her eyes widening in shock. A wave of energy pulsed through her body, and her eyes began to glow with the same ethereal blue light as the being. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, her mind was filled with a torrent of information, a vast and complex knowledge that spanned millennia. The being withdrew its hand, and the blue light in Sharma's eyes faded. She swayed slightly, her face pale and drawn, her mind reeling from the influx of information. She looked at us, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and understanding. It showed me everything, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Our true origin, our purpose? She trailed off, her gaze fixed on the being. A slow, chilling smile spread across her face. We are not what we think we are, she said, her voice now echoing with the same otherworldly resonance as the being. We are something more. The obsidian mirror had shown us our reflection, and the truth was far more terrifying than any nightmare. We were not the pinnacle of evolution, but a mere stepping stone, a tool to be used in a cosmic game we were only beginning to understand. And the being before us, the architect of our existence, was not our savior, but our shepherd, guiding us towards a destiny we could not yet comprehend. Part 11. The Whispering Gallery. The glyphs pulsed with a sickening, organic rhythm, bathing the chamber in waves of emerald light. Elias, his face streaked with grime and exhaustion, traced the patterns with a trembling finger. He felt a pull, a deep resonance within his very bones, as if something ancient and terrible was trying to communicate. Lena, pale and silent, huddled closer to him, her breath catching in ragged gasps. The air itself seemed to vibrate with an unspoken dread. The circular chamber, which they'd discovered behind the pulsating wall, was unlike anything they'd encountered in the alien structure. While the rest of the complex was cold, metallic, and sterile, this chamber pulsed with a strange warmth. The glyphs weren't etched into the walls but seemed to float just above the surface, shimmering like captured fireflies. And at the center of the room, a swirling vortex of emerald energy crackled and hissed, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the glyph-covered walls. It's calling to me, Elias whispered, his voice hoarse. He couldn't explain it, but he felt an overwhelming urge to touch the vortex, to merge with the energy. It promised answers, a truth so profound it would shatter his understanding of reality. Don't, Lena pleaded, her hand gripping his arm with surprising strength. Something's not right. It feels wrong. Elias hesitated. He knew she was right. The air crackled with an unsettling energy, a feeling of something vast and malevolent lurking just beyond perception. The whispering had started again, fainter than before but still present, weaving itself into the very fabric of the chamber. It wasn't just a sound, it was a sensation, a chilling caress against the edges of his sanity. He pulled back from the vortex, the pull lessening but not disappearing entirely. He felt a phantom ache, a sense of loss for something he'd never possessed. Turning away from the central vortex, he focused on the glyphs. He recognized some of the symbols from the artifact Elena had found on Kepler 186f, the same artifact that had led them here. He traced the patterns, trying to decipher their meaning, but they remained stubbornly enigmatic. Suddenly, the whispering intensified, coalescing into distinct voices. Elias looked around wildly, but the chamber was empty. The voices seemed to emanate from the glyphs themselves, overlapping and intertwining, creating a cacophony of whispers that drilled into his skull. He recognized some of the languages, ancient Sumerian, Egyptian hieroglyphs, even a dialect of Sanskrit. But there were others, alien tongues unlike anything he'd ever encountered, twisting and contorting the very air around them. "They're memories," Lena whispered, her eyes wide with terror. I can see them." Elias stared at her. "See what?" "Flashes, images, civilizations rising and falling, wars, sacrifices." Her voice trailed off, her body trembling uncontrollably. "It's like the collective history of 1,000 worlds, compressed into a single moment." Elias felt a cold dread creep up his spine. The glyphs weren't just symbols, they were windows into the past, portals to forgotten epics. And the vortex? He looked back at the swirling emerald energy. It wasn't just calling to him, it was calling to everything, drawing in the memories, the experiences, the very essence of countless civilizations. The whispering intensified, becoming a deafening roar. The glyphs pulsed faster, their light growing blindingly bright. Elias felt a sharp pain behind his eyes, and the world around him began to distort. He could feel the memories flooding into his mind, overwhelming his senses. He saw alien landscapes, bizarre creatures, and civilizations so advanced they defied comprehension. He saw wars fought with weapons that could shatter planets, and rituals performed under the gaze of alien gods. And then, he saw it. A planet bathed in the light of a dying sun. A civilization on the brink of collapse, their technology failing, their resources dwindling. And in their desperation, they turned to something dark, something forbidden. They reached out across the vastness of space, seeking a new home, a new beginning. And they found Earth, but they didn't come in peace. They came as conquerors, as parasites, seeking to drain the lifeblood of a young planet to sustain their dying world. They weren't the benevolent creators humanity had imagined, but something far more sinister. The realization hit Elias with the force of a physical blow. Humanity wasn't descended from these beings, they were created by them. Engineered, manipulated, bred to serve a purpose he couldn't yet comprehend. The whispering intensified, becoming a single, unified voice, echoing the terrible truth. "We are the architects," the voice boomed, resonating through the chamber and deep within Elias's soul. "And you are our harvest." Lena screamed, a primal sound of pure terror. The vortex pulsed, and the emerald light intensified, threatening to consume them both. The chamber floor beneath their feet began to vibrate, and cracks appeared on the walls. The entire structure was destabilizing, threatening to collapse in on itself. They had to get out. Now. The glyphs pulsed, a sickening green now, casting the cavern in a nauseating light. Alara stumbled back, clutching her head. The whispers intensified, no longer just a murmur but a chorus of distorted voices, echoing inside her skull. They spoke of a time before time, of a desolate world choked by ash, and of a desperate exodus. They spoke of Xylos, not as a sanctuary, but as a prison. We were wrong," Aris croaked, his eyes fixed on the pulsating glyphs. He reached out a trembling hand, as if drawn by an invisible force. This isn't a history of salvation. It's a confession." Alara grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Aris, don't. It's affecting you." He shrugged her off, his strength surprising. They chose this planet, Xylos, but it wasn't empty. The green light intensified, flooding the cavern. The air crackled with an unnatural energy. The whispers became screams, a cacophony of pain and rage that threatened to shatter Alara's sanity. She pressed her hands against her ears, but the sound seemed to bypass her eardrums, resonating within her very bones. Images flashed before her eyes, disjointed and horrific. A vast, organic city, pulsating with a sickly luminescence, under siege by humanoid figures clad in black. Weapons of terrifying power unleashed, tearing through the fleshy structures. Screams of the city's inhabitants, not human, not animal, but something other. Then, silence. The green light faded, leaving the cavern in an eerie twilight. Aris stood frozen, his eyes wide and unseeing. "Aris?" Alara whispered, her voice trembling. He didn't respond. She touched his shoulder, and he flinched, a low guttural sound escaping his lips. He slowly turned to her, and the look in his eyes chilled her to the core. They were no longer the eyes of the man she knew, but something cold, alien. "They weren't refugees, Alara," he said, his voice a hollow rasp. "They were conquerors." Alara backed away, her heart pounding in her chest. The pieces began to fall into place, forming a terrifying picture. The advanced technology, the sudden appearance of humanity on Xylos, the unsettling whispers. It wasn't a benevolent arrival. It was an invasion. The glyphs, they don't tell of a peaceful settlement, Aris continued, his voice gaining strength, laced with an unsettling authority. They tell of a war. A war we started. He pointed a shaking finger at the largest glyph, now dimmed and inactive. This planet, it was already inhabited. By a species far older, far more connected to the universe than we could ever comprehend. The images flashed again in Alara's mind, this time clearer. The organic city wasn't just a city, it was a living organism. The inhabitants, symbiotic with their environment, were not individuals but a collective consciousness. And humanity, armed with weapons that tore at the very fabric of reality, had systematically eradicated them. They called this planet Xylos, Aris whispered, a strange smile twisting his lips. We gave it a new name. Earth. Alara recoiled, the implications hitting her with the force of a physical blow. Earth wasn't humanity's cradle, it was a stolen tomb. The whispers weren't warnings, they were the echoes of a dying world, a constant accusation. Aris stepped closer, his eyes burning with an unnatural light. They didn't die, Alara. Not entirely. A low hum filled the cavern, emanating from the glyphs. They began to glow again, not green this time, but a vibrant, pulsating purple. The air thickened, heavy with a palpable energy. Alara felt a pressure in her skull, a growing sense of unease that bordered on terror. They're still here, Aris whispered, his voice barely audible above the growing hum. Waiting, remembering. The purple light intensified, bathing the cavern in an otherworldly glow. The hum became a drone, vibrating through the very rock beneath their feet. The ground began to tremble, and cracks appeared on the cavern walls. Alara wanted to scream, to run, but she was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. She could feel something shifting, something ancient and powerful awakening. The whispers, once again audible, were no longer screams of pain, but something far more sinister, a chorus of anticipation. Aris turned to her, his eyes now completely purple, glowing with an alien light. A slow, chilling smile spread across his face. They remember us, Alara. And they're coming home. The ground beneath them split open, and the cavern was plunged into darkness. The glyphs pulsed, a sickly green now, like a diseased heart struggling to beat. Alara felt a sharp pain in her temples, a pressure building behind her eyes. The humming resonated deeper, vibrating through the very bones of the ship. The others swayed, their faces pale and etched with a dawning horror. We were connected, tethered to this alien script, this confession etched in light. The translation, fragmented and disjointed, began to form in Alara's mind. It spoke of a seeding, a grand experiment conducted across the cosmos. Not of benevolent creators, but of gardeners tending a crop. Humanity wasn't sown for its own sake, but for a purpose far more sinister. The glyphs shifted, depicting a swirling vortex, a cosmic maelstrom that churned with unimaginable energy. Alara recognized it, a scaled-down version of the anomaly they had encountered near Kepler 186f, the one that had drawn them deeper into this abyss. It's a processing plant, she choked out, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. A wave of nausea rolled over Captain Zhao. Processing, what? The glyphs answered. Images flashed. Humanoid figures, stripped bare, their bodies contorted in grotesque positions. Alara saw instruments, cruel and sharp, piercing flesh, extracting something. They harvest us, whispered Dr. Anya, her voice barely a breath. Our essence. The air grew thick, suffocating. The humming intensified, becoming a high-pitched whine that drilled into their skulls. The green light pulsated faster, bathing the chamber in an eerie, sickly glow. The glyphs shifted again, revealing a monstrous, insectal form, its multifaceted eyes gleaming with cold intelligence. This was the gardener, the harvester. Alara staggered back, her breath catching in her throat. The image burned into her mind, the chitinous carapace, the razor-sharp mandibles, the limbs ending in delicate, yet undeniably menacing, manipulators. This wasn't a god, this was a parasite. The fragmented translations coalesced, forming a horrifying narrative. Humanity wasn't unique. The glyphs depicted countless worlds, each seeded with a tailored version of the human template. each cultivated, nurtured, then harvested. The essence extracted, the glyphs revealed, was a form of bioenergy, a fuel for the harvester's civilization, a civilization that spanned galaxies, feeding on the life it had sown. The Kepler 186f anomaly wasn't a gateway. It was a beacon, a signal to the harvesters that the crop was ripe. And the Prometheus, drawn to the signal, had delivered itself, and its crew, right into the harvesters' waiting claws. Panic erupted. Screams mingled with the relentless whine of the glyphs. Captain Zhao slammed his fist on the console, desperate to shut down the display, to erase the horrifying truth. But it was too late. The connection was made. The harvesters knew. A new image appeared, a sleek, obsidian black ship, vastly larger than the Prometheus, emerging from the swirling vortex depicted earlier. It was approaching Kepler 186f. Approaching them. "We need to leave," Zhao roared over the din, his voice raw with terror. "Prepare for immediate jump." But the ship wouldn't respond. The controls were locked. The Prometheus, ensnared by an unseen force, was powerless. The glyphs faded, the green light dying away, leaving the chamber in an oppressive silence. The humming stopped, replaced by a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the ship. It was a sound that resonated deep within Alara's soul, a sound of hunger, of anticipation. Then, the ship lurched violently. Alarms blared, the red emergency lights flashing, casting long, distorted shadows across the panicked faces of the crew. Through the viewport, they saw it, the harvester ship. It dwarfed the Prometheus, a behemoth of black metal against the backdrop of the alien sun. A docking clamp, enormous and grotesque, extended from the harvester ship, reaching towards them like a predatory claw. The Prometheus shuddered as the clamp made contact, its metal groaning under the immense pressure. The growl intensified. The internal doors of the Prometheus hissed open, revealing not airlocks, but pulsating, organic tunnels, extensions of the harvester ship, snaking through the corridors. The air grew thick with a cloying, sweet scent that made Alara's stomach churn. A dark, viscous fluid began to seep from the walls, pooling on the floor, spreading like a living thing. It pulsed with the same sickly green light as the glyphs, and within its depths, Alara could see movement, a writhing mass of something. The crew huddled together, weapons drawn, but their faces betrayed their hopelessness. They knew, deep down, that resistance was futile. A figure emerged from one of the organic tunnels. It was humanoid in shape, but its skin was a sickly gray, its eyes large and black, devoid of pupils. It moved with an unnatural fluidity, its limbs bending at impossible angles. It carried no weapons, but its very presence radiated menace. It stopped before them, its head tilted slightly, as if studying them. Then, it spoke, not with words, but with images, thoughts, emotions, flooding Alara's mind, bypassing language entirely. It was a message of cold, clinical efficiency. A message of purpose. Harvest commenced. Asterisk. Part 14. The Whispers of Xylos. The Xylos glyphs pulsed with a sickly, internal light. Elias traced their serpentine forms, his fingertip leaving a ghostly trail across the cold, smooth surface. The chamber hummed, a deep resonant vibration that seemed to burrow into his bones, making his teeth ache. The air tasted metallic, like the phantom tang of blood. "Are you sure about this, Elias?" Lena whispered, her voice tight with anxiety. The flickering glyphs cast dancing shadows on her face, making her look gaunt and haunted. He glanced at her, his own fear mirrored in her wide, dark eyes. He nodded slowly, more to reassure himself than her. "We have to know. We've come this far." The translated fragments of the Xylos scrolls, pieced together painstakingly over weeks, hinted at a horrifying truth. Humanity's origins weren't just extraterrestrial, they were parasitic. We weren't seeded on Earth. We were implanted. A horrifying experiment by the Xylos, a race so advanced, so alien, that their motives remained incomprehensible. Elias pressed his palm against the central glyph, a spiraling vortex that dominated the wall. The humming intensified, resonating through the chamber like a giant, metallic heart. The glyphs blazed, bathing the chamber in an eerie, violet light. The air shimmered and twisted. Then, silence. The violet light faded, leaving them blinking in the relative dimness. The humming ceased, leaving a ringing silence that pressed against their eardrums. Nothing had changed. Nothing? Lena's voice was laced with disappointment, but Elias detected a thread of relief as well. Before he could answer, a voice, thin and reedy, slithered through the silence. It wasn't spoken, not heard with their ears, but felt, a chilling vibration against their minds. Asterisk. Welcome, children of the harvest. Asterisk. Elias spun around, searching for the source of the voice. There was nothing, just the smooth, featureless walls of the Xylos chamber, the scattered remnants of their technology, and the oppressive silence. Asterisk. We have been expecting you. Asterisk. The voice again, closer this time, like a whisper against his skull. Lena gasped, clutching at his arm. Elias, I can hear it too. Asterisk. Curious, are you not? To know the truth of your genesis? Asterisk. The voice echoed around them, making it impossible to pinpoint its origin. It felt like the chamber itself was speaking, the very walls imbued with the consciousness of the Xylos. Elias swallowed, his throat dry. Who are you? Where are you? Asterisk. We are Xylos. We are everywhere. We are nowhere. Asterisk. The cryptic answer sent a shiver down his spine. The disembodied voice felt ancient, vast, and utterly alien. Asterisk. You seek understanding. We offer knowledge. But knowledge, children, is a burden. Asterisk. Tell us, Elias demanded, his voice trembling. Tell us why we are here. Why you created us. A chilling laugh, devoid of humor, echoed through the chamber. It was a sound that scraped against the soul, a sound that spoke of eons of cold indifference. Asterisk. Created? Such a limited term. You were not created, children. You were cultivated, nurtured, prepared. Asterisk. Lena squeezed his arm, her fingernails digging into his flesh. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror. Asterisk. For what? Elias managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. Asterisk. For the harvest, of course. Asterisk. The voice was closer now, almost inside their heads. Asterisk. The universe is a garden, children. And we, the Xylos, are the gardeners. We plant. We cultivate. We harvest. Asterisk. A wave of nausea washed over Elias. He understood. He understood with a sickening clarity that chilled him to the bone. Humanity wasn't an accident. We weren't a miracle. We were a crop. Asterisk. You have reached the stage of fruition. The time of harvest is near. Asterisk. The violet light flared again, brighter this time, filling the chamber with an oppressive radiance. The walls seemed to melt, to flow, revealing glimpses of something beyond. Visions flashed through Elias's mind, swirling galaxies, alien landscapes, monstrous forms beyond comprehension. He saw Earth, a small blue marble in the vastness of space, surrounded by a swarm of something. Something vast, and dark, and hungry. Asterisk. We planted the seeds. We nurtured the growth. And now, we shall reap the rewards. Asterisk. The violet light intensified, blinding him. He screamed, a sound swallowed by the echoing laughter of the Xylos, a laughter that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a laughter that promised oblivion. The last thing he felt was Lena's hand slipping from his grasp, and the chilling certainty that the harvest had begun. The glyphs pulsed faintly, their luminescence a sickly green against the deepening gloom of the alien structure. Alara traced their contours, her fingers trembling. The translation, pieced together from fragmented data and feverish whispers from the artifact, painted a horrifying picture. Humanity wasn't seated on Earth. We were culled. A failed experiment, deemed too aggressive, too destructive, banished to a primitive planet to wither and die. Earth wasn't a cradle, it was a prison. Around her, the expedition team continued their methodical exploration of the colossal structure, their excitement a stark contrast to the dread twisting Alara's gut. The structure, a cyclopean edifice of polished obsidian-like material, hummed with a low, resonant frequency that seemed to vibrate in her very bones. Each chamber they unearthed unveiled further technological marvels, further testament to the power of the beings who had built it. But Alara couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking deeper into a trap, their every discovery a step closer to a terrible revelation. Captain Zhao, ever the pragmatist, dismissed Alara's concerns as premature speculation fueled by alien propaganda. He saw the structure as a goldmine of knowledge, a chance to catapult humanity centuries ahead. He couldn't, or wouldn't, see the inherent danger. Look at this, Alara. Zhao's voice boomed from a newly opened chamber. A complete star chart. They charted entire galaxies. His excitement was infectious, but Alara felt a chill crawl down her spine. Inside the chamber, a holographic projection shimmered in the air, a breathtaking tapestry of swirling nebulae and constellations. Zhao pointed to a specific cluster of stars, his voice hushed with awe. This is where they came from. Alara stepped closer, her eyes scanning the intricate map. She found Earth, a tiny blue marble on the fringe of a spiral arm, marked with a stark red symbol. It wasn't a symbol of origin. It was a symbol of quarantine. Suddenly, the humming intensified, the structure shuddering around them. The holographic star chart flickered and died, plunging the chamber into darkness. A low growl echoed through the corridors, a sound that resonated with primal fear. What was that? Dr. Singh, the team's biologist, stammered, his voice tight with fear. Before anyone could answer, the glyphs on the walls blazed to life, bathing the chamber in an eerie green light. The growling intensified, closer now, accompanied by the scraping of something large moving through the corridors. We need to get out of here, Alara yelled, her voice barely audible over the growing cacophony. Zhao, finally realizing the danger, barked orders, his voice strained. Back to the lander, now. The team scrambled towards the entrance, their previous excitement replaced by raw terror. The growling was almost upon them, the scraping sound growing louder, closer. They could hear the heavy thud of something massive approaching. As they reached the corridor, a monstrous shape emerged from the shadows. It was vaguely humanoid, but impossibly large, its skin a mottled gray, its limbs thick and powerful. Its eyes, glowing red pits of malevolence, fixed on the fleeing humans. It roared, a sound that ripped through the silence, a sound that spoke of ancient rage and a hunger long suppressed. The first to fall was Dr. Singh. The creature lunged, its massive hand swatting him aside like a fly. His scream was cut short as he slammed against the wall, his body crumpling into a broken heap. Panic erupted. The team scattered, their training forgotten in the face of pure, unadulterated terror. Alara stumbled, her leg catching on a protruding piece of the alien architecture. She fell, the breath knocked out of her. The creature turned its attention to her, its red eyes burning into her soul. It stalked towards her, its heavy footsteps echoing through the corridor. Alara knew this was the end. She closed her eyes, bracing for the inevitable. But the blow never came. She opened her eyes to see Zhao, his face a mask of grim determination, standing between her and the creature. He brandished a plasma rifle, the only weapon they had brought, a pathetic defense against such a monstrosity. "Run, Alara," he yelled, his voice cracking with emotion. "Get back to the lander. Tell them what happened." He fired the rifle, the plasma bolt striking the creature's chest. The impact barely phased it. The creature roared again, swiping at Zhao, sending him flying across the chamber. He landed with a sickening thud, his body still. Alara, tears streaming down her face, scrambled to her feet and ran. She didn't look back. She could hear the creature's triumphant roar echoing behind her, a chilling testament to humanity's true, terrifying origin. She was the last survivor, the bearer of a terrible truth that threatened to shatter everything humanity believed about itself. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that this was only the beginning. The glyphs pulsed, a sickening green light reflecting in Alara's wide, terrified eyes. The humming intensified, vibrating through the metal floor and up into her bones. The air crackled with static, the scent of ozone sharp and metallic. The others, huddled in the chamber's corner, were little more than shivering shadows, their faces pale masks of dread. It's opening," whispered Dr. Chen, his voice barely audible above the low thrum. He pointed a trembling finger towards the glyph-covered wall. A section, directly in the center, was beginning to glow with an almost unbearable intensity. The metal around it warped and buckled, as if something immensely powerful were pushing from the other side. Alara felt a primal fear grip her, a terror older than humanity itself. It whispered in the back of her mind, a chorus of alien voices promising a homecoming that felt more like a doom. The image of the skeletal figure she'd seen in the archive flashed before her eyes, its elongated limbs and hollow sockets filled with the same unearthly green light. The humming escalated into a deafening roar. The glowing section of the wall finally gave way, not with a bang, but with a sickening sucking sound. A vortex of swirling green light erupted into the chamber, pushing the stale air outwards in a violent gust. The temperature plummeted, leaving a layer of frost on the metal walls. Alara struggled to breathe, the air suddenly thin and biting. The vortex pulsed, expanding and contracting like a living lung, revealing glimpses of something beyond. A landscape bathed in the same eerie green light. A sky filled with swirling nebulae unlike any she'd ever seen. The smell emanating from the portal was indescribable, metallic, organic, and ancient, carrying with it the faintest hint of something sweet. Like decaying fruit, one by one, the others succumbed to some unseen force. Their eyes glazed over, their bodies becoming rigid. They began to walk, slowly at first, then with increasing speed, towards the vortex. Dr. Chen, his face a mask of serene acceptance, stumbled past Alara, brushing her shoulder with an icy hand. He didn't seem to see her, his gaze fixed on the otherworldly vista beyond the portal. Alara wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but stand there and watch her colleagues walk willingly into the unknown. But her limbs felt heavy, her mind clouded by a growing sense of inevitability. The whispers in her head intensified, becoming a coherent voice, seductive and promising. "Come home, child. Asterisk. We have been waiting for you. Asterisk. Your true purpose awaits. Asterisk." Alara fought against the pull, the unnatural compulsion that was drawing her closer to the vortex. She clawed at the icy metal floor, digging her nails into the frost, desperate for any kind of anchor. She thought of Earth, of the sun on her face, of the laughter of her children. The memories flickered, weak and distant, like dying embers in a blizzard. "Don't resist," asterisk the voice purred. "Embrace your heritage," asterisk. The green light intensified, engulfing the chamber. Alara squeezed her eyes shut, tears freezing on her cheeks. She could feel the vortex pulling at her, tearing at her very essence. The voice was now inside her head, echoing through her thoughts, promising power, knowledge, and belonging. Suddenly, a hand clamped down on her arm, pulling her back with surprising force. Alara gasped, opening her eyes to see Captain Zhao, his face grim, his eyes clear and focused. He was the only one who hadn't succumbed. "Fight it, Alara," he shouted over the roar of the vortex. "Don't let them take you." His words were like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. Alara clung to his gaze, drawing strength from his unwavering resolve. She took a deep breath, the icy air burning in her lungs, and pushed against the mental pull with all her might. "We are not their children," Zhao roared, his voice filled with a defiant rage. He pulled Alara further back, away from the pulsing green light. "We are human, we choose our own destiny." The vortex pulsed one last time, then began to shrink, the green light fading. The humming decreased, the temperature slowly rising. The others, still entranced, continued their slow march towards the diminishing portal, their faces blank and emotionless. One by one, they reached the swirling light and vanished, absorbed into the alien landscape beyond. Finally, the vortex collapsed in on itself with a soft pop, leaving behind only a smooth, unmarked section of wall. The humming ceased. The silence that followed was deafening. Alara slumped against the wall, her body trembling with exhaustion. Zhao released her arm, his face etched with weariness and a profound sadness. They were the only ones left. What was that?" Alara whispered, her voice hoarse. Zhao looked at her, his eyes filled with a chilling realization. "I think," he said slowly, "we just witnessed the rapture of the damned." The green glyphs on the wall remained, silent and ominous, a constant reminder of humanity's terrifying, alien heritage. And somewhere, on a distant planet bathed in perpetual twilight, their former colleagues were being welcomed home. The glyphs pulsed with an unsettling light, bathing the cavern in a sickly green. Elena felt a creeping chill despite the stifling heat radiating from the alien structure. The translated words hung heavy in the air, an echo of a terrible truth: the harvesters shall return. The cycle begins anew. Asterisk. Cycle? Dr. Aris muttered, his voice hoarse. He ran a trembling hand over the smooth surface of a glyph, his fingers tracing its intricate curves. What cycle? Elena didn't have an answer. She could feel the dread radiating from the others, a shared, primal fear that spoke of something far older than human history. The ground beneath their feet felt unstable, not just physically, but in a more fundamental way. as if their understanding of reality itself was beginning to crumble. Suddenly, the glyphs flared, bathing the cavern in an intense white light. Elena shielded her eyes, a high-pitched whine ringing in her ears. When the light subsided, the air crackled with an unnatural energy. The ground trembled violently, and the cavern walls began to shift and groan. "We need to get out of here," Captain Eva shouted over the din. They scrambled back the way they came, their flashlights bouncing wildly in the chaotic darkness. The tremors intensified, rocks falling from the ceiling and blocking their path. Elena stumbled, her hand scraping against the rough cavern wall. She cried out, a sharp pain lancing through her arm. Behind them, the alien structure pulsed with an eerie green light, the glyphs swirling and morphing into new, unsettling shapes. A deep, resonant hum emanated from within, growing louder with each passing second. It felt like the very planet was groaning under some immense pressure. They finally reached the tunnel entrance, only to find it partially collapsed. Dust and debris rained down on them as they frantically tried to clear a path. The resonant hum grew louder, closer, and the ground trembled with such force that Elena feared they would be buried alive. With a final, desperate heave, they managed to dislodge a large boulder, creating a narrow opening. One by one, they squeezed through, collapsing onto the rough, uneven ground outside. They didn't look back. They didn't dare. The resonant hum pursued them, echoing through the network of tunnels, a harbinger of something terrible. Back in the relative safety of the landing module, the crew huddled together, their faces pale and drawn. The tremors continued, though less violently, a constant reminder of the unsettling discovery they had made. "What do we do now?" Dr. Aris asked, his voice barely a whisper. He was staring at his hand, his fingers still tracing the phantom shapes of the glyphs. "We leave," Captain Eva said firmly, her voice strained. "We get out of here and warn the others." Elena nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked back at the ridge where the entrance to the cavern lay hidden. The ground still trembled, and the air crackled with residual energy. She couldn't shake the image of the glyphs, the chilling words echoing in her mind. "The harvesters shall return." Asterisk. The journey back to the orbiting research vessel was fraught with a palpable tension. Every tremor, every flicker of the ship's lights, sent a jolt of fear through them. Elena couldn't escape the feeling that they were being watched, that something was following them. When they finally docked with the research vessel, they were met by a team of concerned scientists and security personnel. Captain Eva immediately ordered a full quarantine of the landing module and requested an emergency meeting with the research director. The meeting was tense. Captain Eva presented their findings, the translated glyphs, and the unsettling events in the cavern. The research director, a stern-faced woman named Dr. Moreau, listened intently, her expression growing increasingly grave. This changes everything," she finally said, her voice low. "The implications are staggering. We need to leave," Captain Eva insisted. "This planet is not what we thought it was. We need to warn the council." Dr. Moreau hesitated. "We've invested so much in this research, years of work. Years of work that could lead to our extinction," Captain Eva interrupted, her voice rising. "We can't afford to stay here any longer." Dr. Moreau sighed, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. "I understand. Prepare for immediate departure. We'll send a coded message to the council. They need to know what we've found." As the research vessel prepared for emergency launch, Elena stood by the viewport, staring back at the planet shrinking in the distance. The setting sun cast long shadows across the alien landscape, giving it a desolate, almost mournful appearance. She shivered, a sudden chill running down her spine. She could still feel the resonant hum in her bones, the echo of the glyphs in her mind. "The harvesters shall return. The cycle begins anew." Asterisk. And as the research vessel hurtled away from the planet, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't escaping, but merely delaying the inevitable. The cycle had begun, and humanity, unknowingly, had just become a part of it. The harvesters were coming. The echoing clang of the metal door reverberated through the sterile corridor, sealing me inside the decontamination chamber. The hissed release of disinfectant spray stung my nostrils, carrying the metallic tang of blood, my blood. I pressed my hand against the cold, smooth wall, the tremor in my fingers a stark contrast to its unyielding solidity. Dr. Aris's parting words echoed in my mind. "We need to be certain." Certain of what? That the transformation hadn't taken root? The chamber's lights flickered, casting grotesque, dancing shadows. I glanced at my reflection in the polished metal. My face, normally pale, was flushed, a feverish heat radiating from my skin. The gash on my arm, where I'd brushed against the pulsating, fleshy wall of the alien structure, throbbed with a sickening rhythm. It was healing, impossibly fast. Too fast. The spray ceased, and the door hissed open. Two figures in biohazard suits stood outside, their visors reflecting the stark white light, making them appear inhuman, like guardians of some sterile hell. They gestured for me to follow. I obeyed, my legs feeling strangely heavy. They led me deeper into the facility, to a section I'd never seen before. The air here was colder, carrying a faint, almost imperceptible hum. We reached a large, circular room. Dominating its center was a cylindrical tank, filled with a viscous, amber fluid. Suspended within it, illuminated by an eerie blue light, was a shape. It was humanoid, but elongated, its limbs thin and almost skeletal. Its skin, where it was visible beneath a thin membrane connecting it to the machinery surrounding the tank, was a sickly gray. Its head was large, disproportionate to its body, and bald. Its eyes, closed, were hidden beneath thin, translucent lids. Tubes snaked from the tank, disappearing into the walls, pulsing with a rhythmic, organic throb. "What is that?" I managed, my voice barely a whisper. One of the figures turned, its visor reflecting my own horrified expression. Dr. Aris's voice, distorted by the suit's communicator, crackled through the room. "Patient Zero," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "The template." My stomach churned. "Template? The original," Aris continued. "The progenitor. Recovered from the crash site, years ago. Kept, stable. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken horrors. I stared at the creature, a primal fear gripping me. It looked wrong. Fundamentally wrong. A grotesque mockery of human form. And yet, there was something familiar about it. A flicker of recognition, deep in my gut, that sent a shiver down my spine. "The signal," I stammered, remembering the strange, pulsing resonance I'd felt within the alien structure. It came from this thing?" "Yes," Aris confirmed. "It communicates. In a way, broadcasts. A call." "A call?" I repeated, feeling the room tilt. "To whom?" A long silence followed, broken only by the hum of the machinery and the rhythmic pulse of the tubes. Then, Aris's voice, low and chilling, filled the room. "To its children." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, my hand flying to the gash on my arm, which now pulsed in time with the tubes connected to Patient Zero. I felt a wave of nausea, a dizzying sense of unreality. What are you saying?" "The signal, it activates," Aris said, his voice strained. "A latent potential, a connection. It reawakens something." I looked at Patient Zero, at its pale, still form, and then down at my own hand. The gash was almost completely gone, the skin smooth and unblemished, but beneath the surface, I could feel something shifting. Changing. "We're not from Earth, are we?" I whispered, the realization dawning with horrifying clarity. "No," Aris said. We are not. And this thing, it's what we become," Aris finished, his voice barely audible. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the room, red lights flashing. The hum of the machinery intensified, escalating to a high-pitched whine. The fluid in Patient Zero's tank began to bubble, churning violently. "Containment breach," a voice shouted over the intercom. I turned to run, but the two figures in biohazard suits grabbed me, holding me fast. I struggled, panicked, but they were too strong. "What are you doing?" I screamed. Aris's voice, distorted and frantic, came over the intercom. "The transformation, it's accelerating. We need more data." I looked at Patient Zero. Its eyes were open now, glowing with an unnatural, phosphorescent light. Its lips pulled back in a silent, chilling smile. The membrane connecting it to the machinery tore, the amber fluid spilling onto the floor. It reached out a long, skeletal finger, pointing directly at me. And then, the scream began. Not from me, from within me, a deep, guttural roar that ripped through my throat, shattering the sterile silence of the laboratory. The world around me dissolved into a swirling vortex of pain and terror. I felt my bones shifting, my skin stretching, my very essence unraveling. I was becoming one of them. And I knew, with horrifying certainty, that humanity's true origin was not a beginning, but an ending. The airlock hissed, the heavy door groaning inwards like a sigh from a dying titan. The stench that poured out was unlike anything Alara had encountered, even within the fetid depths of the archive. It was a primal, organic reek, thick with the smell of decay and something else, something sickly sweet, like overripe fruit rotting in the sun. "Stay close," Jax whispered, his voice strained. He held the pulse rifle at the ready, its barrel gleaming in the weak light from the corridor. Alara gripped her own weapon, her knuckles white. The corridor beyond was shrouded in darkness, broken only by the flickering emergency lights, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with a life of their own. They stepped inside, the airlock closing behind them with a final, ominous clang. The temperature dropped dramatically, a chilling wave washing over them. The silence was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic drip of something viscous from the ceiling. They moved slowly, each step echoing eerily in the vastness. The walls were lined with what looked like enormous incubation pods, their surfaces stained with a dark, viscous substance. Some of the pods were cracked and empty, others still sealed, their contents hidden within. A thick layer of dust coated everything, giving the impression that this place had been abandoned for centuries. What were they growing here? Alara whispered, her voice barely audible above the drip drip drip. Jax didn't answer. He stopped at a pod larger than the others, its surface covered in intricate symbols that pulsed with a faint, internal light. He reached out, his gloved hand hovering just above the surface. "Don't touch it," Alara warned, a shiver crawling down her spine. He ignored her, pressing his palm against the cold glass. The symbols flared, the pulsing light intensifying, bathing the corridor in an eerie, otherworldly glow. A low hum began to emanate from the pod, growing louder with each passing second. Inside, a shape began to coalesce, dark and indistinct. It shifted and pulsed, like a heart beating outside a body. Alara felt a growing sense of dread, a primal fear she couldn't explain. This wasn't just a lab, it was a birthing chamber. Suddenly, the humming stopped. The light faded, plunging the corridor back into semi-darkness. The shape within the pod remained, still and silent. Jax slowly withdrew his hand, his face pale. I think I woke it." Before Alara could respond, a high-pitched screech echoed through the chamber, shattering the silence. It was a sound that seemed to claw at her sanity, a sound born of pure, unadulterated terror. The lights flickered violently, then died, plunging them into complete darkness. Panic clawed at Alara's throat. She fumbled for her flashlight, her heart pounding in her chest. The screeching continued, closer now, accompanied by a sickening slithering sound. The beam of her flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a horrifying sight. The pod Jax had touched was cracked, a gaping hole in its side. Emerging from the shattered glass was a creature unlike anything Alara could have imagined. It was humanoid in shape, but its skin was a sickly, translucent gray, stretched taut over a skeletal frame. Its limbs were long and spindly, ending in sharp, bony claws. Its head was small and elongated, with huge, black eyes that seemed to burn with an unholy light. But it was the creature's mouth that truly horrified Alara. It stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth, dripping with a viscous, black fluid. The creature screeched again, lunging towards Jax. He fired his pulse rifle, the energy bolts striking the creature's chest. It recoiled, momentarily stunned, but the wound seemed to close almost instantly, the flesh knitting itself back together with sickening speed. "It's regenerating," Alara shouted, firing her own weapon. The energy bolts struck the creature, but with the same limited effect. It seemed impervious to their weapons. The creature lunged again, its claws slashing at Jax's arm. He cried out in pain, stumbling backwards. Alara aimed for the creature's head, firing repeatedly. One of the bolts struck its eye, causing it to shriek in agony. It staggered back, momentarily blinded. This was their chance. Alara grabbed Jax's arm, pulling him towards the airlock. "We have to go." They ran, the creature's screeching echoing behind them. They reached the airlock, Alara frantically pressing the button to open the inner door. The heavy door began to slide open, revealing the brightly lit corridor beyond. But as they stumbled through the opening, a shadow fell over them. The creature, its remaining eye burning with rage, lunged forward, its claws outstretched. The airlock doors slammed shut, sealing Alara inside the brightly lit corridor. The screams of Jax, cut short abruptly, echoed through the metal, a chilling testament to the horrors lurking within the birthing chamber. Alara stood there, paralyzed with fear, the blood draining from her face. She was safe, for now. But she was alone, and something told her the horrors she had witnessed were only the beginning. The creature, whatever it was still alive. And it was hungry. Part 20. The Whispers of Xylos. The glyphs pulsed with a sickening, organic light, the cave walls seeming to breathe around us. A low hum vibrated through the floor, a resonance that felt disturbingly familiar, like a forgotten heartbeat within our very bones. Alara, pale and trembling, clutched the archaic device we'd found nestled within the Xylos structure. It resembled a segmented, metallic insect, its multifaceted eyes glowing with the same unsettling luminescence as the glyphs. We hadn't dared activate it, fearing what horrors it might unleash. The whispers, Silas murmured, his voice barely audible above the hum. They're getting louder. We all heard it then. Not a sound, not exactly, but a pressure against the inside of our skulls, a subtle, insidious intrusion. It wasn't a language we understood, yet it carried meaning, a chilling premonition of something vast and ancient awakening. The whispers spoke of Xylos, not as a planet, but as an entity. A living, breathing thing. The glyphs, they're changing, Alara gasped, pointing a shaky finger at the wall. The intricate patterns were shifting, flowing like liquid light, forming new symbols, telling a story we desperately wished we couldn't comprehend. They depicted the seeding of life, not by benevolent creators, but by a parasitic entity, Xylos itself. The glyphs showed humanoid forms, not being nurtured, but being drained, their life force fueling the growth of immense, pulsating structures that resembled the heart of the Xylos ship. Humanity wasn't created, it was cultivated. A crop. We're livestock, I whispered, the realization settling like a lead weight in my stomach. The unsettling hum intensified, resonating with the fear that gripped us. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, no longer just a pressure but a voice, slithering into our minds, caressing our deepest fears. Suddenly, the device in Alara's hand began to vibrate violently. Its segmented legs twitched, and the multifaceted eyes pulsed with an almost blinding light. Alara cried out, dropping it as though it had burned her. The device skittered across the floor, coming to rest at the base of the largest glyph, a depiction of Xylos itself. The hum escalated into a deafening roar. The glyphs blazed, the entire cave bathed in their pulsating light. The ground beneath us trembled, and cracks spider-webbed across the walls. The whispering voice became a chorus, chanting, echoing, filling our minds with images of unimaginable horror. We saw the true form of Xylos. Not a planet, but a gargantuan, biomechanical organism drifting through the void. Its surface wasn't rock and soil, but a pulsating, fleshy membrane covered in colossal veins that pulsed with a sickly green light. Massive, tentacle-like appendages stretched out into space, searching, seeking. The glyphs revealed its purpose, to seed, to drain, to consume. Humanity was just one harvest among many. We saw our future, a future where Xylos returned, not as a derelict ship, but as a ravenous god, come to reap what it had sown. We saw our planet, Earth, enveloped by those colossal tentacles, its life force being drained away, feeding the insatiable hunger of Xylos. We saw ourselves, our loved ones, reduced to withered husks, our essence fueling the monstrous entity's endless journey through the cosmos. The insect-like device clicked, a sharp, metallic sound that pierced through the cacophony. A beam of light shot out from its multifaceted eyes, striking the glyph of Xylos. The glyph shimmered, and a section of the cave wall dissolved, revealing a tunnel leading deeper into the heart of the structure. The whispers intensified, urging us forward, promising answers, promising power, promising a place within Xylos's grand design. But the promises were laced with a chilling undertone of servitude, of assimilation, of annihilation. Alara was sobbing, Silas stood frozen, his eyes wide with terror, and Amelia clutched her crucifix, muttering frantic prayers. I felt a pull, a strange, magnetic draw towards the tunnel, a desire to see what lay within, to understand the horrifying truth of our existence. The whispers promised solace, an end to the fear. But another part of me, a primal instinct for survival, screamed in protest. We weren't meant for this. This wasn't our destiny. We were not livestock. We were human. I grabbed Alara's arm, pulling her away from the tunnel's gaping maw. We have to go, I shouted, my voice strained. We can't stay here. Silas snapped out of his trance, nodding frantically. Amelia, her face ashen, followed close behind. We turned our backs on the whispering promises, on the horrifying truth, and ran. We ran as though the very entity of Xylos was reaching out to claim us, its whispers echoing in our minds, a chilling reminder of the harvest to come. As we stumbled through the darkness, a new sound joined the whispers, a deep, rhythmic throbbing that seemed to emanate from the core of the planet itself. Xylos was awakening, and it was hungry. The glyphs pulsed with a sickly, internal light. A low hum, like 1,000 whispers, resonated from the obsidian sphere. It throbbed in Alara's hands, mirroring the frantic beat of her heart. The revelation, that humanity was not born on Earth, but seated here, a cosmic experiment gone wrong, hung heavy in the air, suffocating them. Worse, the glyphs confirmed their terrible suspicion. The creators were returning. The symbols, Silas croaked, his voice strained, they're shifting. Forming a countdown. He was right. The intricate web of alien script was rearranging itself. Symbols melting into new configurations, coalescing into what looked disturbingly like a timer. Alara's breath hitched. How long? Hours? Days? The hum intensified, the obsidian sphere growing warmer against her skin. She almost dropped it, a primal fear seizing her. This wasn't just an artifact, it was a beacon, a homing device, announcing their presence to something unimaginable. We have to destroy it, she whispered, her voice raw with desperation. No, Silas snapped, his eyes wide with a manic gleam. This is the key to understanding, to power. We can't just destroy it. Power? Alara recoiled. Silas, these beings, they treated us like lab rats. They abandoned us. What power could they possibly offer that isn't a trap? They're our creators, Alara, he insisted, his voice rising. They hold the secrets of the universe, of our very existence. Imagine what we could become with their knowledge. The argument was futile. Silas, blinded by the allure of forbidden knowledge, couldn't see the danger. The countdown continued, the glyphs pulsing with increasing urgency. We need to warn the others, Alara said, turning towards the tunnel leading back to the main cavern. Silas grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly strong. No, this is ours, Alara. Ours alone. A chill ran down Alara's spine. The look in Silas's eyes was unsettling, almost predatory. The obsession with the sphere, the whispers of forbidden knowledge, had warped him. He was no longer the man she knew. Let me go, Silas, she said, her voice trembling. He tightened his grip, a cruel smile twisting his lips. Don't you see? They chose us. Us. We are the inheritors. He pulled her closer, the obsidian sphere radiating heat against her cheek. The hum was deafening now, vibrating through her bones, resonating with something deep within her, a primal echo of her forgotten heritage. Alara struggled, but Silas was stronger than he looked. He dragged her further into the chamber, towards the back wall, where a section of the rock face seemed to shimmer and distort, as if reality itself was unraveling. A gateway. The humming reached a crescendo, the glyphs on the sphere blazing with blinding light. Alara squeezed her eyes shut, a wave of nausea washing over her. The air crackled with energy, and the oppressive silence of the cavern was shattered by a deep, resonant voice that seemed to emanate from the very walls. You have called, the voice boomed, echoing through the chamber. And we have answered. Alara opened her eyes. The shimmer in the wall had intensified, coalescing into a swirling vortex of iridescent light. From within, something began to emerge. It was humanoid in form, but impossibly tall and slender, its skin a shimmering, opalescent white. Its features were sharp and angular, its eyes large and black, devoid of pupils, radiating an ancient, alien intelligence. It moved with an unnerving grace, its limbs seeming to flow rather than step. Silas stood transfixed, his eyes wide with awe and terror. He held the obsidian sphere aloft, offering it to the being as if it were a sacred relic. The being reached out a slender hand, its fingers tipped with claws that shimmered like polished obsidian. It took the sphere, its touch sending a jolt of energy through Alara that made her cry out. "You are different," the being said, its voice resonating deep within Alara's skull. It turned its gaze to her, its pupil-less eyes boring into her, stripping away every layer of pretense, every shred of hope. "You resist," it continued, tilting its head, a gesture that seemed both curious and predatory. "Interesting." Alara staggered back, her mind reeling. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that whatever plans these beings had for humanity, they were not benevolent. Silas, in his blind pursuit of knowledge, had opened a door to a nightmare far beyond their comprehension. The countdown had ended. Their time was up. The being turned back to Silas, a thin smile spreading across its face, a smile that promised nothing but pain. "And you," it said, its voice dripping with a honeyed malice, "you have proven useful." The last thing Alara saw, before darkness consumed her, was Silas's face, contorted in a mixture of ecstasy and horror, as the being reached out and touched him, its obsidian claws sinking into his flesh. The whispers began anew, louder, more insistent, promising power, knowledge, and a truth far more terrifying than any lie. The glyphs pulsed, a sickly green light reflecting in Elias's wide, terrified eyes. The chamber resonated with a low, guttural hum that vibrated through the very bones of the research team. The translated words, hovering in the air like spectral accusations, burned themselves into their minds. "The harvest approaches." A strangled gasp escaped Dr. Anya Sharma's lips. "Harvest? What harvest?" Elias, his voice barely above a whisper, pointed a trembling finger at the central platform. The crystalline structure, previously inert, now throbbed with an inner luminescence, casting grotesque, elongated shadows across the chamber walls. "It's activating the device, the one that brought us here, to Earth." Panic tightened its icy grip on the remaining team members. The implication was horrifically clear. If this device was what brought humanity to Earth, a harvest implied something, or someone coming to collect. "We need to get out of here," Anya said, her voice sharp and urgent. "Now." But the exit, the very tunnel they had used to enter, was now sealed shut by a shimmering, energy field. The air crackled with an unseen power, trapping them like insects in amber. The guttural hum intensified, the glyphs on the walls blazing with a blinding emerald light. The platform in the center began to rotate, the crystal within spinning faster and faster, creating a vortex of swirling, iridescent energy. A piercing, high-pitched whine assaulted their eardrums, a sound that seemed to burrow into their skulls, twisting their thoughts, planting seeds of primal fear. Suddenly, the swirling energy coalesced into a single point, a point of blinding white light that expanded rapidly, consuming the platform, the chamber walls, everything. Elias squeezed his eyes shut, shielding them from the unbearable brightness. He felt a sensation of falling, of being pulled apart, atom by atom. Then, silence. He opened his eyes cautiously. The blinding light was gone, replaced by a dim, ethereal glow emanating from the now empty space where the platform once stood. The glyphs on the walls had dimmed, their pulsing light reduced to a faint flicker. The energy field blocking the tunnel had vanished. Elias staggered to his feet, his mind reeling. Anya and the others lay scattered across the chamber floor, unconscious. He shook Anya gently, his heart pounding in his chest. She groaned, her eyes fluttering open. What happened?" I don't know," Elias stammered, glancing nervously at the empty space in the center of the chamber. "But whatever it was, it's gone." As the remaining team members slowly regained consciousness, a chilling realization dawned on Elias. The silence, the emptiness, the lack of any immediate threat, it was almost more terrifying than the blinding light and the deafening hum. It was the quiet before the storm, the ominous stillness that precedes a predator's strike. He knew, deep in his gut, that the harvest wasn't over. It had just begun. Days turned into weeks. Trapped within the alien structure, the research team desperately tried to find a way out, a way to communicate with the outside world. But their efforts were futile. The structure was a labyrinth of twisting corridors and sealed chambers, a technological marvel beyond their comprehension. The silence, once a relief, became a constant, oppressive presence, amplifying their fear and paranoia. Then, the nightmares began. Each member of the team started experiencing vivid, horrifying dreams. Dreams of vast, insectoid creatures with shimmering, chitinous exoskeletons and multifaceted eyes. Creatures that moved with unnerving grace and speed, their mandibles clicking and snapping like sharpened blades. Creatures that looked at them with cold, calculating intelligence, as if assessing their worth, their suitability. The dreams were so real, so visceral, that the line between dream and reality blurred. The team members started to lose track of time, their sanity fraying at the edges. Whispers echoed through the corridors, unseen eyes seemed to watch them from the shadows. They were being hunted, stalked by an unseen predator, both in their dreams and in their waking hours. One by one, they began to disappear. First, it was Dr. Chen, the team's linguist. He vanished from his sleeping quarters without a trace, leaving behind only a faint, metallic scent and a lingering sense of dread. Then, it was Dr. Ramirez, the geologist. He was found slumped against a wall, his eyes wide with terror, his body drained of all color, as if something had sucked the very life out of him. The remaining team members huddled together, terrified and desperate. They knew, with a chilling certainty, that the creatures from their nightmares were real, that they were being hunted, harvested, one by one. Elias, watching Anya's face, pale and drawn with fear, knew that their time was running out. The silence of the structure was no longer empty. It was filled with the unseen presence of something alien, something malevolent, something that considered humanity nothing more than a crop, ripe for the picking. The harvest was approaching its gruesome climax. The glyphs pulsed a sickening green, the air thrumming with a low, resonant hum that vibrated deep within our bones. We stood on the precipice of the abyss, the shimmering portal swirling before us like a diseased eye staring into our souls. Around us, the skeletal remains of the Exel, their brittle limbs locked in postures of silent agony, whispered a cautionary tale we were too far gone to heed. Dr. Aris Thorne, his eyes wide and manic, clutched the translated scroll fragment, his knuckles bone white. This is it, he rasped, his voice hoarse. The rite of return, the way home. Home? Sergeant Miller spat, his face grime-streaked and pale. He gestured to the horrific landscape surrounding us, the pulsating green sky, the twisted, alien flora. This hellhole? This isn't anyone's home. Thorne's gaze sharpened, a flicker of something cold and alien in its depths. You misunderstand, Sergeant. This isn't our home. Our true home lies beyond that gateway. A world of unimaginable beauty, of power beyond human comprehension. A world we were ripped from, millennia ago. He stepped towards the swirling portal, a strange, almost beatific smile spreading across his face. The Exel, they feared our return. They knew what we were capable of. They imprisoned us here, on this desolate rock, hoping to extinguish the flame of our true heritage. But they failed. The hum intensified, the portal expanding, pulling at us with an unseen force. The remaining members of our team exchanged uneasy glances. We had come to this forsaken planet seeking answers to the enigma of humanity's origin, only to find a truth far more terrifying than we could have imagined. The whispers started then, faint at first, then growing louder, filling the air with a chorus of sibilant voices that seemed to claw at our sanity. They weren't words, not in any language we knew, but more like impressions, concepts, raw emotion bleeding into our minds. Fear, longing, an overwhelming sense of asterisk wrongness. Private Ramirez screamed, clutching his head, his eyes rolling back in his sockets. He staggered towards the portal, drawn by an unseen force. They're calling. I have to go home. Before we could stop him, he plunged into the swirling vortex, his form dissolving into the green light like smoke. No, Miller roared, reaching out, but it was too late. Ramirez was gone. The whispers intensified, wrapping around us like icy fingers. The scroll in Thorne's hand glowed brighter, mirroring the pulsating green of the portal. He began to chant, the words guttural and alien, twisting our minds, unraveling our very sense of self. I felt a chilling pull, a deep-seated yearning, echoing the longing in Ramirez's final cry. A part of me, a hidden, primal part one hadn't known existed, recognized the chant, resonated with the whispers. It whispered back, promising power, belonging, a return to a place I couldn't remember but somehow knew with unnerving certainty. Miller grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. Don't listen to it, Lieutenant. It's a lie. It's trying to trick us. His words were a lifeline, a desperate plea for reason in the face of overwhelming madness. I clung to them, fought against the seductive whispers that clawed at the edges of my mind. But the pull was growing stronger, harder to resist. We were created for this, Thorn rasped, his voice distorted by the chant. We were meant to rule, to conquer. This is our birthright. He stepped into the portal, disappearing into the swirling green. One by one, the remaining members of our team succumbed to the whispers, their eyes glazing over with an eerie light before they followed Thorn into the unknown. I was the last one left. Miller's grip on my arm loosened, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. He looked at me, a plea in his eyes, then at the portal, his face contorted in a silent battle against the insidious whispers. And then, with a shuddering sigh, he let go. He turned towards the portal, a faint smile playing on his lips. I remember now, he whispered. I remember, and then he was gone. I stood alone, the wind whipping around me, the whispers now a deafening roar in my mind. The portal pulsed, beckoning, promising. The image of Ramirez, of Thorn, of Miller, their faces contorted in a mixture of ecstasy and terror, flashed before my eyes. The truth of our origin, the terrible truth, was laid bare before me. We weren't explorers, we weren't seekers of knowledge. We were exiles, banished to this desolate rock for crimes beyond human comprehension. And now, the call to return was too strong to resist. I took a step towards the portal, the whispers now a lullaby, promising power and glory beyond my wildest dreams. Another step, and then another. The green light enveloped me, pulling me into the swirling vortex. As my world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds, one final thought echoed through my mind. What horrors await us, on the other side? The glyphs pulsed, a sickening, organic throb of light against the cavern walls. I understood now, not with my mind, but with something deeper, something primal and terrified. The glyphs weren't a history lesson, they were instructions. Instructions for us, for what we were meant to become. The ground began to tremble, a low guttural hum vibrating up through the soles of my boots. Alara, her eyes wide and reflecting the pulsing glyphs, clutched my arm. Elias, I don't like this. We need to leave, but we couldn't leave. We were caught, not by physical restraints, but by something far more insidious, a pull towards the very heart of this horrifying revelation. The hum intensified, resonating in my teeth, and a sickeningly sweet smell, like overripe fruit and decay, filled the air. From the central pool, the amniotic fluid began to churn. Bubbles the size of my head rose and popped, releasing not air, but shimmering motes of light that danced around us, clinging to our skin like phosphorescent insects. I tried to brush them off, but they adhered, sinking into my pores with a faint burning sensation. Then, the screaming started. It wasn't a human scream. It was a chorus of wails, high-pitched and ululating, echoing through the cavern from a source I couldn't pinpoint. It burrowed into my skull, a cacophony of pure, undiluted anguish. Alara covered her ears, her face contorted in a mask of terror. But the sound bypassed our ears, resonating directly within our bones, our very being. The amniotic fluid began to glow with an eerie, internal light. The churning intensified, forming a vortex in the center of the pool. And then, it rose. A shape, vaguely humanoid, yet utterly alien, coalesced from the swirling fluid. It was translucent, almost gelatinous, its form constantly shifting and reforming. Tendrils of light pulsed within its body, mirroring the glyphs on the cavern walls. It had no discernible features, only the suggestion of a head, elongated and bulbous, and two large, dark voids where eyes should have been. The screaming intensified, merging with the humming of the earth into a single, unbearable crescendo. The glyphs blazed, bathing the cavern in a harsh, pulsating light. I felt a searing pain in my chest, as though something was trying to claw its way out from within. I looked down to see my skin shimmering, the motes of light coalescing into intricate patterns that mimicked the glyphs on the walls. Alara, her eyes fixed on the creature rising from the pool, began to speak, but her words were not her own. They were guttural, rhythmic, echoing the alien wails that filled the cavern. Her skin, too, shimmered with the glyphs, pulsing with an unnatural light. The creature extended a tendril towards us, a shimmering, almost ethereal appendage that pulsed with the same internal light. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen, paralyzed by a terror so profound it transcended thought. As the tendril touched Alara's forehead, her screams ceased. Her body went rigid, her eyes rolling back in her head. The glyphs on her skin blazed, burning with an almost unbearable intensity. Then, with a sickening crack, her bones began to reshape, her limbs twisting and elongating, her skull distending into the same bulbous shape as the creature's. The transformation was swift, brutal, and complete. Alara, or what had been Alara, stood before me, no longer human, but a grotesque parody of our species. A mirror image of the creature that had emerged from the pool. The creature turned its void-like eyes towards me. The screaming had stopped, replaced by a deafening silence that amplified the humming of the earth. I knew what was coming. I knew what I was meant to be. I was not a descendant of this place. I was a template, a raw material, waiting to be molded into the creature's image. I was the next step in their horrifying cycle. The tendril reached for me, and as it touched my skin, I felt a cold, alien consciousness invade my mind, stripping away my humanity, layer by agonizing layer. The glyphs burned into my flesh, a roadmap of my transformation, a testament to our true, horrific origin. And in that final moment, before the darkness consumed me completely, I understood. We hadn't come from Earth to the stars. We had come from the stars, to be consumed by Earth. The last vestiges of my human mind clung to a single, horrifying thought. This was not the end of humanity. This was the beginning of something far, far worse. This was the harvest. The glyphs pulsed, the obsidian chamber vibrating in a low thrum. Elias, his face a mask of exhausted horror, traced the final symbol with a trembling finger. The air grew thick, heavy with the weight of millennia. The knowledge he had gained, the terrible truth he now carried, pressed upon him like a physical burden. Humanity's birthplace, the planet Elysium, wasn't a cradle of life, but a prison. We weren't descended from benevolent starfarers, but from discarded experiments, flawed iterations deemed unworthy by our creators. And now, they were returning. The portal, a swirling vortex of violet light, expanded, consuming the chamber wall. From its depths, a sound emerged, a low, guttural drone that resonated deep within Elias's bones, a sound that bypassed his ears and spoke directly to something ancient and primal within him. He staggered back, clutching his head, a scream forming in his throat but never quite escaping. The first figure emerged, not with the triumphant fanfare Elias had morbidly anticipated, but with an unsettling quietness. It was humanoid in form, but elongated, its skin a shimmering, iridescent silver. Its eyes, large and black, held an intelligence that chilled Elias to the core. There was no malice in them, no hatred, only an unnerving detachment, as if he were no more significant than an insect under a microscope. More figures followed, silent and ethereal. They moved with an unnatural grace, their limbs flowing like liquid metal. The chamber filled with their presence, the air crackling with an unseen energy. Elias, trapped between the portal and the silent figures, felt a strange pull, a yearning to join them, a whisper in his mind promising transcendence, promising release from the burden of his humanity. He closed his eyes, fighting the insidious whisper. He had seen what that transcendence entailed. A complete erasure of individuality, a merging into a collective consciousness devoid of emotion, devoid of self. He had seen the remnants on Elysium, the husks of beings once like him, their minds absorbed, their bodies transformed into living conduits for the Creator's will. He opened his eyes, his gaze locking onto the leading figure. "Why?" he rasped, his voice barely audible above the low thrum of the portal. "Why abandon us? Why imprison us here?" The figure tilted its head, the black eyes seeming to peer into his very soul. No sound escaped its lips, yet Elias heard a voice, not in his ears, but within his mind, a voice cold and ancient as the universe itself. Imperfection. Asterisk. The single word echoed in his mind, a devastating indictment. Humanity, in all its flawed glory, was deemed unfit, unworthy. Elias laughed, a harsh, broken sound. Imperfection, he repeated, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. And yet, we survived. We thrived. We built civilizations, we created art, we loved, we lost, we lived. The figure remained impassive. It raised a hand, a slender, silver hand that shimmered in the violet light of the portal. Elias braced himself, expecting obliteration, expecting the end. But it didn't come. Instead, the figure's hand moved towards the portal, its fingers tracing symbols in the air. The violet light pulsed, then began to shrink, the guttural drone fading into silence. The figures, one by one, turned and stepped back into the shrinking portal, their movements as fluid and silent as their arrival. Elias watched, his mind reeling. They were leaving? After millennia of silence, after abandoning their creation, they were simply leaving? The last figure paused at the threshold of the portal. It turned its head, its black eyes meeting Elias's one last time. And then, he heard the voice again, cold and distant, but this time, with a hint of something else. Resilience, asterisk. The portal vanished, the obsidian chamber returning to its silent stillness. The glyphs on the walls, once vibrant and pulsing, now lay dull and inert. Elias stood alone, bathed in the dim light of his emergency lantern, the weight of the truth pressing down on him, heavier than ever. They had deemed humanity imperfect, unworthy. But they had also acknowledged its resilience. They had left, not to destroy, but to observe. Humanity had earned a reprieve, a chance to prove itself. But for what purpose? What did these ancient, detached beings want? What future awaited humanity, now that its past had been revealed in all its terrible glory? Elias didn't know. He only knew that the silence of the abandoned chamber was now a different kind of silence. It was no longer the silence of oblivion, but the silence of expectation. And that, he realized, was perhaps the most terrifying silence of all. For now, humanity was truly alone, facing an unknown future under the watchful, unblinking gaze of its creators. The game had changed, but the stakes remained the same. The survival of a species deemed imperfect, yet undeniably resilient. And the true horror, Elias knew, had only just begun.